This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to another edition, a game day edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Big one tonight for the Winnipeg Jets. They close out their homestand, looking to go 3-1. And tonight's opponents, the Florida Panthers, with returning former Jets head coach Paul Maurice. Lots to get to around Pomo's return, as well as this matchup tonight, and we're going to hit both sides of it. Really looking forward to having former NHLer and Panthers analyst Bill Lindsay join us coming up in about 20 minutes. Talk to Bill about the season that the Panthers have had so far, how they're playing coming in after two convincing 5-1 wins to halt a pretty ugly skid they were on when they began this 5-game road trip out in Alberta with a couple of losses. We'll also talk about some of the issues that they've had off the ice, losing Alex Barkov right now, obviously a huge hole in their lineup, as well as maybe some growing pains with major player personnel moves in the offseason after a President's Trophy year, and of course, the new head coach, Paul Maurice. After that, Mike McIntyre will join us, as well as Brandon Rewucki, and we'll hit the current Winnipeg Jets, this current game tonight, but also think back to some of the highs and lows of the Maurice era here in Winnipeg. Should be a great one. Before we bring Michael Remis in, I do want to thank Mike Allison Coaching right off the bat for a super chat. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate your support. And let's get to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day, including our friends at Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Not Auto Corp, as well as Consolidated Supply, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, F Apparel, Canadian Club Whiskey, Boston Pizza, Culligan Water, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, and of course our favorite local beer, Little Brown Jug. Couple housekeeping things to get to right now, and I wanted to get this right off the top, especially for podcast listeners. Everyone knows how much and how popular marbles is here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Normally we do it at the end of our Friday shows. However, this week, beginning Thursday, you all have the 12 days of Christmas. We've got the 12 days of marbles and our Consolidated Supply Winnipeg Sports Talk Marbles Tournament of Champions. If you missed the news, we are going to be running marble races 12 consecutive days. Each marble race, the top 3 marbles will qualify for our final championship race to be held, the final show of 2022 on December 30th. And thanks to the great support of Consolidated Supply, we've got an unbelievable prize. Bomber season tickets for 2023 to the winner of the final race. So gang, if you're listening on the podcast, you've heard us talk about it. Set a little daily timer for about 2:45. If you're not able to catch the whole show on YouTube, jump in. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel so you're eligible to win. You'll hear the call to enter, and we'll run marbles. So it's going to be so much fun. A dozen straight days of marbles on the program, and an incredible, incredible prize courtesy of our friends at Consolidated Supply. Of course, Consolidated Supply, pop down and see them. They are open to the public at 1395 Niagara Road East, and they are the go-to guys for all things golf when it comes to irrigation, turf, golf carts, and more. But as you look ahead to 2023 and thinking about some projects that might work for you and your family in your home, think about maybe a beautiful new outdoor kitchen project, a hot tub, which can certainly help you through what's coming when it comes to winter. They've got it all. Talk to Spicy Joe and the gang at Consolidated Supply for that. And thanks again to them for their great support. Cannot wait to get going with the Marbles Tournament of Champions beginning on Thursday here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. The other order of business I needed to get out right off the bat, A huge thanks to our friends at Wallace & Wallace, who, along with Josh Morrissey, have teamed up with us to support the Dream Factory and recognize some of the unsung heroes in our community. We've got a number of entries for our first month's winner, and we will be announcing that probably tomorrow or Thursday on the program. But you still have time to nominate an unsung hero in the community. And what we're looking for is people that are very quietly going about their business, making a difference and making Winnipeg and Manitoba a better place to be. All we need you to do is send us an email telling us about them, the work they're doing with charities, whether there's tons of people spending so much time in all aspects of minor sports, which means so much to many of our listeners. We want to hear about them. The winner of the nominees each month is going to get an autographed jersey from Jet star defenseman Josh Morrissey. Wallace & Wallace is going to make a $500 donation to the Dream Factory in the name of the Winnipeg Sports Talk listener that nominated the unsung hero. And Josh and Margot Morrissey are going to match that donation with $500 as well. So we're going to be making our first $1,000 donation in the name of one of you. And of course, rewarding one of the great nominees for the Unsung Hero program with Wallace & Wallace. Thanks again to them for making it all happen. And by the way, if you want more information on the Dream Factory, click on the YouTube channel on the links. You'll find a way. And certainly at this time of year, might be a great way to make a donation to a great charity that's making so much impact for young children that are going through some incredible challenges early on. All right, let's get to it. Remo's here. We're ready to go. I've had this game circled on the calendar since the schedule came out. Maurice is back with the Florida Panthers, and the Jets looking to build off the second half of the Anaheim game after sort of an ugly start and then a very forgettable game against the Columbus Blue Jackets following that 5-0 shutout of the Avalanche to begin this homestand. What's going on? How are you?
I'm just counting down to tonight, Huss. Big matchup, Jets, Panthers. Jets are going to get back on track. You know, they had a rough one Friday against Columbus, and the start on Sunday against Anaheim, not great as well. So they're going up against this Panthers team. They've had a number of injuries. Alex Barkov, Anton Lundell is out. Anthony Duclair is still injured. Patrick Hornqvist. I mean, that's 4 guys injured. The Jets have a majority of their lineup except for Nikolai Ehlers. I think this is a good test for the Jets. And, their former coach is on the bench too. But I think they're focused on their own game. They're playing their own ball, Huss. I don't think they're that concerned about what's happening on the other bench.
Do you think so?
No. It's got to cross the mind. Although I know Scheifele and Wheeler were answering questions today. I do think maybe it'll bring back certain feelings. I don't know what kind, but I did enjoy Jeff's comments yesterday. I mean, just going back to last year. I mean, Paul Maurice did, he did quit on the team in the middle of last year and really sent them into a tailspin in the second half in a season that was kind of wasted and where they didn't deliver on expectations. And this year, because of the change, you're seeing, a much more focused and consistent team that is where, I think above where we thought they would be in the standings. So I think it'll bring out some emotions in some players for sure. But at the same time, I think they are singular focused on improving on the last 2 games.
Listen, first off, as far as the hockey game goes, this is another great opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets to, test themselves against one of the best teams in the league. And, they will. I mean, listen, Nikolai Ehlers, we know how important he is to the Winnipeg Jets. He's been out long-term and will continue to be out. But, man, the loss of Barkov, and we've heard that from Maurice after a couple of the tough losses early on in this road trip as to how much they're missing him right now. But again, you can only play the team on the schedule and you can only play the roster in front of you. So everyone deals with that sort of thing right now, but it is a nice spot for the Winnipeg Jets to get them at the end of this 5-game road trip. As far as Maurice goes, I'll just say this. And listen, I'm sure I've said this before. I mean, the way that this was put forth to the Jet fan base was that Paul Maurice decided to walk away. I will take you back to basically this time last year. I believe the date that he walked out was the game day, the game of the Washington Capitals. It was a Friday. I believe it was the 17th of December, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, the Jets were in free fall at that point. They had a great start at 9-3-3 and essentially were going in the exact wrong direction at that time. And there was a ton of talk about, is this the time to finally make a coaching change that many people thought was probably overdue for a couple of seasons. I mean, to me, and it's easy to be the armchair quarterback or Monday morning quarterback. I mean, the way things went in the second half of the 2019 season and the first round exit, I think if we look back, that probably was the time to make a change. It didn't happen. Paul Maurice had his extension, I believe, already at that point and continued through. But the narrative that Maurice just decided that he was done and quit, I'm not sure whether that's entirely true. I think that there was plenty of pressures, internal pressures on the hockey club to try and get things turned around. And they had just put all their chips in the Maurice basket. There certainly was an argument at that point to make a coaching change. And listen, when I think back, because of how important Maurice was to the organization, the time he'd been here, his very close relationship with the people in the club all the way up to Mark Chipman, it wouldn't have surprised me if they realized that they were going to make this move and gave him the option maybe to go out on his own. I'm not sure that looks any better, to be honest. And I mean, certainly you can hear a lot of Winnipeg Jet fans that still quote that, hey, he quit on the team, that still rubs them the wrong way. The bottom line is it was long overdue for him to leave. And I think now we are seeing the benefits of a new approach, a new message, and a new head coach with the job that Rick Bowness has done so far this year. The one thing that I will say, if you look back to what happened last year, that maybe doesn't support my theory that this was, an arrangement that they allowed him to go out, was the fact that, they went to Dave Lowry and created one of the most awkward situations in recent NHL history and got absolutely nothing for it. All of that is in the past right now. I think everyone would agree that the Winnipeg Jets as a hockey team, as an organization right now with the fresh new start under Bowness, are in a much, much better place. But I think it is important to remember, as much as a lot of people, certainly the loudest ones on social media, and I think they are a minority, but they certainly, are loud enough that, we maybe hear it a little bit more, would think that, overall, Paul Maurice did some really good things, legitimized this organization in a lot of ways early on, and took the team to the highest heights that it's ever been. For me personally, I still think back, and I'll probably never get over what happened to the Winnipeg Jets in the second half of the 2019 season. They were right there at the top of the standings as we went into the new year. And the team played, I don't know how we want to describe it. They stunk for a good portion of the second half of that season. They moonwalked into the playoffs. They blew first place. And they ended up losing a series that against the St. Louis Blues, and the Blues, of course, went on to win the Stanley Cup. So, it's a perfect time to get into the why not question of the day. Of course, this is the return of Paul Maurice. You knew he'd be hitting it on it. Give us in the chat and in the comments, how will you remember Paul Maurice's time as the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets? So hit us up in the thoughts. And I wanted to get all that out. We've spent a lot of time talking about this on and off, and it's so easy because of how big of a figure he is in Winnipeg Jets history and how much baggage maybe the Winnipeg Jet fans have as to what's happened in the last few years to continue to go back to the Maurice era. And frankly, how refreshing it's been with the way Rick Bowness has handled the team, the media, his speaking to the fans. But I think there's some truth on both sides, where Paul Maurice did some great things for Winnipeg, was certainly a great member of the community, was an unbelievable orator to the fans and the media each and every day, whether or not you were buying some of the things that he was selling. But right now, the Winnipeg Jets are in a better spot. And if anyone has issues, it's probably that maybe that move wasn't made a little earlier, considering what happened the last couple seasons.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Paul Maurice just spoke to the media right as we went on, and Mike McIntyre was there, and he's going to join us. But he asked Paul Maurice if he has any regrets about how his time ended. And Maurice said, in hindsight, he should have stepped down prior to the 21-22 season, not during it. And Mike has a story coming out. So we're going to touch on that, more of that later. And I think when you look back overall, I think you do have to have a positive tone. He came in and, I think the Maurice bump right away, you could tell, and he did take them to the playoffs. I do remember when they acquired Yuri Tlusty and Lee Stempniak. They did get swept by the Ducks in one of the closer sweeps I can remember. But I think I agree with you that something happened halfway through that 2018-19 season where they were on top and really slid. They had to bring in Matt Hendricks for the locker room. And looking back, maybe that time would have been appropriate to make a change. And, it seems like hearing from Paul Maurice today that, even last year, apparently his heart wasn't in it. He stepped down midway through the season. It's such a crazy situation where a head coach of a professional team steps down. You don't really see that too often. And again, an awkward situation where a player's father becomes the head coach. And we just heard last year from their relationship. So I think it ended, less than ideal circumstances. But overall, I think he should get a reception, but a nice reception, nice ovation for what he did here. But at the same time, you really want to take it to him in the game. And
Yes.
these are 2 points that the Jets absolutely want to get.
Yeah, Maurice is going to get a loud ovation from a portion of the fans tonight. He'll get a polite golf clap from another of others. There'll be a small minority, if they actually go to games, that will boo or maybe give a little bit of a Bronx cheer, and then it's time to drop the puck. And listen, I don't know whether this is shared by a lot of others, because as I said, I've got mixed feelings. I mean, I still really regret, and I do put some of it on Maurice as to what happened in the end of that 19 season. I think a lot of the things internally that went wrong for the Winnipeg Jets that led to Patrick Laine being traded probably falls, under the auspices of the job of the head coach to fix and make it happen. So, I mean, that's something that I have a hard time getting over. And listen, if there was a time to make a change, as I said, I think after that season probably was when the time to do it was there, because that was the Jets' opportunity. We often talking about this window of those players. It was 17-18 and it was the 18-19 season. And I hope at some point some of the people involved write a book 20 years down the road. I'll be the first person to buy it, as opposed as to what really happened. But we can't let the way things ended maybe completely overshadow a lot of the great things that Paul did in this community. And I mean, I think certainly from a media standpoint, everyone enjoyed what he had to say on a regular basis, even if sometimes it was maybe less than, let's say some of the honesty that we get from Rick Bowness wasn't often there. But the bottom line right now is this is a great opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets to take on one of the top teams in the league, albeit that have had somewhat of a rough start under their new head coach. And most importantly, get 2 points in the standings and start knocking on the Dallas Stars' door at the beginning of at the top of the Central Division. And I've said this a number of times. I mean, I want this team. This is the game that, as a Jets fan, putting the fan hat on for a minute, I want them to win this game so bad tonight. And I really do think that the Winnipeg Jets players, especially some of the guys that were there for a long time, that maybe felt a little bit left behind when Maurice did leave in the fashion that he did last year, will be feeling the same way. And that's one of the most fascinating things about this game, and really the Jets team in this season so far, Reem, is that there wasn't massive wholesale changes to the roster. It has been Rick Bowness, and to quote Kevin Cheveldayoff, the seismic shift in the organization that he's brought here that's brought to the Jets to the heights that not many people expected them to be in at the beginning of the season. And on the other side of things, the pressure that it comes to take over a team that had the success that the Panthers did yesterday, presumably being the guy to take them over the top. And when those results aren't there right off the bat in the first quarter of the season, you start hearing that. We've certainly heard that from a good portion of the Florida Panthers fan base over the last number of weeks.
Yeah, I think you felt the change with Rick Bowness going back from training camp even. You just heard the players talk how Pierre-Luc Dubois, how he really likes how they play fast. And I remember last year he talked a lot about how they were standing still all the time and getting tired because the D weren't allowed to move up into the play. You hear Bowness saying that the D are coming, and then you see Josh Morrissey get off to this unbelievable start to the season where he's leading the team in points. And I don't think anyone would have predicted that. Brendan Dillon saying, it's black and white on what is expected and everyone expected of them, and everyone should know. So you see a lot of, just from what the players are saying, they welcome the change with Rick Bowness. As for Florida, it's definitely been some ups and downs. They won their last 2 games. I think they've realized that Sergei Bobrovsky, even though he's getting paid $10 million a year, he is not the starting goalie on this team. Spencer Knight I think it seems like he's going to get the bulk of the starts moving forward, and he's going to be starting for them in goal. But they're battling, injuries. I mentioned off the top, missing your number one center. Anton Lundell is a very good center as well, along with Duclair and Hornqvist. So they are missing some guys, and you can see that in the lineup tonight. But their top line is very good. So I'm expecting a very solid game, and you hope the Jets come out and with more urgency than they did in Sunday's game. I'll just say the line. They're going with the same lineup with Perfetti, Scheifele, Wheeler, Connor, Dubois, but Mikey Eyssimont getting opportunity there. Barron, Lowry, Manalainen, Axel Jonsson, Fjallby, David Gustafsson, Sam Gagner, Morrissey, DeMello, Dylan Pionk, Sandberg, Schmidt, and there was one other roster move at 1 o'clock when waivers was released. Elliot Friedman tweeting out Dominic Tornado placed on waivers by the Winnipeg Jets. He was on waivers earlier. He didn't get claimed, was on the Moose, so we'll have to see. And, former Jet Evgeny Svechnikov was placed on waivers by San Jose as well. So another name. So
interesting.
There you go.
Well, we'll talk more about this with Brandon and Mike, and we hope that we'll be able to get some of the audio from Paul Maurice before the end of the show as well. We are going to focus in on the Panthers side of things coming into this game in just a minute with Bill Lindsay. Just before we do that, I do want to thank our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market. If you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, shop at any of the 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores. You'll be supporting a great local company, family-owned and operated since 1936, also carrying Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, too. And hey, folks, with the holiday season here, why not to give the gift of health? Vita Health has so many gift options for your loved ones: essential oils, candles, artisan soaps, bath bombs, lotions, chocolates, you name it. And you can also stock up on some of your favorite holiday food items like stuffing, cranberry sauce, non-alcoholic wines and drinks, plant-based turkey options, and more. And you can also pre-order your natural free-run turkey in-store today. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. And listen, the fans of the Panthers probably don't have to deal with this, but we here in Winnipeg are ready for the winter, and it is that time again. And as the cold weather hits, you need your car to start every time, and that's where Manitoba Battery comes in. Donnie and the gang have the best selection of batteries at the best prices to get you going through the winter. And if you're not sure if you need one, you can head down to see them at 1026 Logan Avenue and let their staff test your battery and help figure out whether it's the time to replace it or not. And if you already know it is time to get a new battery for your car, save time and money by letting Manitoba Battery deliver the battery right to your door. You can order online or by phone, and then they'll have your battery to the same day as long as you know by 3 p.m. Let them know by 3 p.m. that day. It's that simple. Only one place where you can buy a battery from the comfort of your home, get it delivered, and save money while you do it. That's Manitoba Battery, 1026 Logan Avenue, and online at manitobabattery.com. All right, well, really looking forward to this conversation. We'll focus in on the Jets in a few minutes, but of course the Panthers are here. Paul Maurice behind the bench, and longtime NHLer and Panthers analyst Bill Lindsay joins us now. Bill, thanks so much for doing this. It's great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Andrew. Everything good in Winnipeg?
Well, yeah, it's a little chilly, but I'll tell you what. I mean, I think the fans are pretty fired up. Had a bit of a dud at home against Columbus on Friday, but overall, there's not too many folks that thought that this team would be knocking on the door of first place in the Central Division so far. Let me ask you, from your standpoint, what have you heard or what have people been saying about the Winnipeg Jets and the great start, obviously, in the other conference and far away from the beautiful South Florida that the Panthers call home?
It's been impressive just to watch from the outside. Everyone's talking about the Jets, and the big word you heard last year was the fractured dressing room. And Rick Bowness comes over. Blake Wheeler gets stripped of the captaincy. I was kind of wondering which turn this would take, which way this would kind of go. But Rick Bowness was able to galvanize that group, and seems like everyone's buying into the system. They play more of a zone system in the defensive end. A lot of teams play pressure. They don't. And that way, to me, is a real strong way, if you don't have the best defensive team, to limit shots. And Connor Hellebuck is standing out. He's maybe the front runner for the Vezina Trophy. And that's without Nikolai Ehlers, Mason Appleton, some of these players. So to me, and I work a lot at the NHL Network, everyone's asking about the Jets and how they're doing this. They are truly one of the big surprises in the NHL. I don't believe anyone expected quite this turnaround from the Jets.
Yeah, still a long ways to go, but hey, these points count and they matter. And being in a nice, comfortable spot right now and hopefully continuing on will go a long ways to be part of that playoff tournament, which was the goal at the beginning of the season. Bit of a different story with the Panthers. And maybe you can, first off, Bill, take us through the offseason for the Panthers, because this team had such an incredible run last season, top team in the league in the regular season, in an absolute hellacious division, falling out in the playoffs and, a real tough run. You don't often see that much turnover, both personnel-wise and coaching, but that's what happened. I mean, how did you see the offseason that Bill Zito authored?
Bill Zito, a lot of it was predicated on what happened in the playoffs. If they would have had more success in the playoffs, you would not have seen those kind of changes. The regular season's one thing. The playoffs is a total different beast. And after winning that President's Trophy, it was a tough to even get by Washington and then get swept by Tampa Bay. They were expecting more. Then you had to figure out what you were going to do salary cap wise. Jonathan Huberdeau was due to an extension around that $10 million mark. You already signed Barkov. Huberdeau is going to be 30 when that extension kicks in if you elected to go that route. And that would put you with a player that's at the end of his deal going to be 37 years old. He's going to get that 8-year deal. All of a sudden, Tkachuk came on the market. Bill Zito felt about that those are players that are unicorns. Players like Tkachuk are just really unique in the league, hard to find. Looked at the age difference, the value that Tkachuk could bring this way, decided to do the deal quickly. So you got a younger Tkachuk at a pretty good price tag. You're still, the ownership here, got to give them credit. They are willing to spend money. Mackenzie Weegar, that was thrown in. That to me maybe surprised me a bit to throw in a quality defenseman like that. But Bill Zito's aggressive, and he wanted to formulate this plan. Paul Maurice comes over, Andrew Burnett to take over a little bit more experience behind the bench. And Bill Zito he's not going to sit back, whether it works or whether it doesn't. He's going to do what he feels right for this team. There was some chances that he felt were favorable to make additions and change this kind of the look of what this Panther team is about. And it's all about, they got to get in the playoffs this year where they're at this moment. But to them, it's about achieving some playoff success. Finally, it hasn't been there for back when I was playing in '96, really.
I mean, listen, the trade for Tkachuk, I mean, we'll be looking back. I believe the first sign and trade deal technically in NHL history. And we've talked a lot about what Calgary was able to do because they were really in a jam. And, Huberdeau was one. The Weegar, I'm with you. I mean, that was sort of the eye-opener. And the fact they were able to get those guys done and keep them, I think, speaks well what Calgary did. But it was very clear. Matthew Tkachuk was the guy they wanted, and you're exactly right, for the playoffs. Tell us about the coaching move. I mean, Brunette comes in a very weird situation in the way that Joel Quenneville left and does a pretty darn good job, I think, overall.
Yeah.
What was it about?
When you're finalist for the Jack Adams, you do a good job.
What was the reaction of Paul Maurice's hire, and why do you think he was the guy that Bill Zito tapped on that can be the guy to take this team to the next level?
Just experience would be the only answer that I have there. With Andrew Burnett taking over, he did a wonderful job for Joel Quenneville. The group, it was speedy, and what Quenneville had put in place, then Andrew Burnett, he had a really good relationship with the players, just kind of followed up on it. Maybe there was a belief, I'm not exactly sure on this, from Bill Zito, that maybe he didn't have quite the hammer when it came to really push these guys and get on them, because he had that assistant coach and had that really good relationship with a lot of these players. And all of a sudden, as head coach, you got to be able, it went so well during the regular season, but all of a sudden in the playoffs, you got to scratch declare, you got to make tough decisions. Andrew Burnett, would he been able to grow in that? Quite possibly. They didn't feel that they had the patience to go and let Andrew Burnett learn on the job in the second year. Went out, felt that they needed that experience. That was the main reason to go out and get Paul Maurice, is to hold players accountable throughout, not only throughout the course of the regular season, but in the playoffs. You know him from the time in Winnipeg. He does command respect when he walks into a locker room, or even when he's addressing the media. He has that kind of personality. He's been around the game that long, and that to me is what they were looking for, is just to have a veteran presence also behind the bench.
Yeah, no, he's a very unique communicator. There's no doubt about that. And I mean, the experience, I mean, listen, there's very few, in any sport that can come in to a locker room and have, that much experience to build on. The season so far has sort of been up and down. And I guess part of it is the expectations. I mean, how would you describe the pressure on Maurice going into, this isn't just a team that whacked their coach because they sucked last year. I mean, this is a team that's so close that believes that he is the guy to put it over the top. And that's probably quite different than the last few stops that he's made in the NHL.
It's quite different. And coming into the year, they actually got off to a good start. For the first 15 games, if you went down, everyone talks about analytic, but analytically, if you look back at all the games, you probably couldn't have a worse record. Weren't scoring on your chances. Power play wasn't coming through, even though you're capitalizing. The goaltending, you're getting 50 shots at one end, 21 against you, and you're losing games 3-2. Lost games against Arizona. Teams, you mentioned the loss to Columbus. You lost a game against Columbus. You lost a game against Chicago. Just games that should have been wins that ended up being losses. Then you go out west on this road trip, no Barkov. Now Lundell's out of the lineup, and you're really starting to test your organizational depth. And maybe this is the best job Maurice has been able to do of late, getting back-to-back wins in Vancouver, in Seattle. And goaltending, it looks like Spencer Knight might be the guy. Paul Maurice, after 20 games, just said, I'm going to go with whoever it looks like is going to be the hot netminder, and they're going to get a chance to play the majority of the games. Spencer Knight's played well. We'll see Winnipeg tonight. They're going to have a lot of call. Chris Tierney gets called up. Riley Nass gets called up. Eppo Niemi. You got a lot of regulars out of the lineup. So this is really the big test for the Panthers. Can they do it without some of their big guns in the lineup and continue to roll and go in the right direction? These are kind of watershed moments when you're kind of hanging around that playoff bubble. When you have injuries, are you still able to win?
I was listening to the post game. I don't know, it was after the Edmonton or the Calgary game. And Maurice very clearly mentioned how much they are missing Alex Barkov. I mean, what's the situation with him right now? And I mean, how different are the Panthers without their number one center than when he's in there patrolling it for 20 plus minutes a night?
Ooh, it's a big difference. He goes against the other team's top lines, able to shut down the top players. And Barkov coming out, for him, it just wasn't even up to his standards. Maybe that's why you just weren't quite getting there. And then to go through the illness, not have him. He drives so much offensively, defensively, power play, penalty kill. Just one of those special players, he's a top 10 player in the NHL, especially when he's playing his best. But to me, on the flip side of it, it's good for this Panther team to not have him and say, okay, you don't have your best players. Let's see where we rank. Let's see what we can do without some of our best players, Barkov, in the lineup. And it's been a pretty good return of late. When he gets back in the lineup, it's just going to be that much more of a boost and help this team. But you just don't replace a guy like Barkov. It has to be done more by committee.
Bill Lindsay, Panthers analyst, with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk, getting ready for the lone visit of Paul Maurice and the Panthers to Canada Life Center this year. They're missing Barkov right now. And we talked about what they had to give up to get Matthew Tkachuk. But holy smokes, he's having a start. No questions about how he's fitting in with his new team, huh, Bill?
Everything you wanted and more. And to see him uphand, you got to see him over there in the West quite a bit. We didn't get to see him over here in the East as much. But when he came, I got to play with his dad, Keith, and I know their family. They're characters to begin with. They got loads of personality.
No doubt.
It's just they're loaded with personality, and they always want to be in the mix. The best compliment maybe you could give a player like Matthew Tkachuk, he's got all-world skill. He's got elite skill. If he didn't have that, if he was a 20-point guy, he would be one of the best fourth-line guys in the NHL. He has that kind of grit and determination to his game. So you got a first-line player with a fourth-line mentality. And that's why I said those players are hard to get. They're kind of like unicorns, and they don't change teams much. You look at Marchand. You look at Tom Wilson. You look at some of these guys. Tkachuk's even a level above of a player like Tom Wilson. But those are some of compare like those players do not generally change teams. They tend to stay where they're at for a long, long time because teams recognize that value. And that to me is where Bill Zito said, I'm going to go out. These players don't become available very often. And he went out there. Matthew Tkachuk has made an immediate splash. He's taken the most penalties. He's drawn the most penalties. He continues to score. It doesn't matter what Barkov's in the lineup. Whoever's in, he's able to drive offense, help the teammate. He makes the great compliment too is he makes people better around him. He does not need someone to make him better. So he's able to really evaluate not only himself, but his line mates and the whole team. That's why he's brought here. He's delivered on the contract.
You know, I mean, he certainly has 12 goals, 34 points. I mean, he's 12 clear of Carter Verhaeghe, who's number 2 in Panthers scoring right now, and doing everything they hoped. But as we mentioned earlier, Bill, the price to pay was steep. We know what Huberdeau meant to this hockey club, but you mentioned Mackenzie Weegar. How big of a loss has he been on the blue line? And give us a little idea of how the blue line is looking right now with a very different look, some younger players in on the third pairing right now, and some injuries to other players that they've gone through so far this season.
Ekblad out at the top. One player that maybe doesn't get enough recognition that's really good is Gustav Forsling. I've got to see this to him to struggle early in his career, but he to me, he skates, doesn't have the offensive ability as maybe a Paul Coffey or someone like that, but he's got the same skating style where it's effortless, like a Scott Niedermayer, where you just kind of just float up and down the ice and can get back on the back check, be the fourth man on the rush. So he's getting more responsibility. He's a quality guy. Brandon Montour's minutes have gone up from 17 and a half last year to around 25 this year. And he's taken full advantage of it. He's on close to a point a game, if not a point a game. He's going to blow by his career numbers. And Ekblad is consistent. You're going to get 10 to 15 goals a year from Ekblad when he's healthy, and he'll be around that 60-point mark. Josh Mahura, Radko Gudas have formed a good pairing. There's some chemistry there. And Mark Stahl, to his credit, is what he is. That's maybe where you have if you get down to Mahura, Gudas, and Mark Stahl, that's the bottom three. That's maybe where you could say, okay, we can exploit this team a little bit. But those top three, I'll give them credit. If you watch them play, those top three, even with the loss of Weegar, are as good as you'll find around the NHL. It's just those bottom three being able to carry those 10, 15, 17 minutes a night, whatever they're going to play, and be effective. If they do that, this team wins.
Well, and you mentioned Montour. I mean, playing monster minutes right now and just 2 points off a point a game pace so far. So it's quite clear that Maurice is liking what he's doing and is running him out there as much as he can right now. Just before we finish up, Bill, I mean, as far as you're around the team quite often and on a regular basis. How's Paul handling the new change? The pressures that come with obviously the expectations around, but the ups and downs for a team that, so much is expected of really right from game one of this regular season.
I've gotten to talk to him a few times. He's excited. You talked to him and you talked about his time in Winnipeg. He enjoyed it, but at the end it got to a point where it became fractured and it was too much, and the joy was not there for him as being a coach, and to come down here and change environments. And it's not always the case, but it is a chance down here where it is sunny. It is nice weather. You get a chance with a really good team. His kids go to school down here. At least one of them does at the University of Miami. His other one's just across Alligator Alley there. So you get a chance to be around your kids, bring your wife down to South Florida to enjoy, and then coach a really good hockey team. I think kind of re-energized him and really kind of put the fun back into it, and brought the family's important to everyone. So to have that family dynamic that it's set up for him down here in South Florida is just another another piece that works well. There is pressure, but he's embraced the pressure, and it's a new challenge. To me, looking at Paul Maurice, there probably was few jobs if he was going to continue coaching that he would say, okay, I would go after this and do it again, because maybe I have a chance here to do what he's never done, maybe win a Stanley Cup. And that's all those dynamics factored in is what's played the role here. And even though there's been some ups and downs, I firmly believe he's enjoying being behind the bench.
Well, and Bill, with all of that, and the success that the Panthers have had over the last couple of years, I mean, the fan base is different too. I mean, their expectations are so much higher as well because of the way that the bar's been raised by this hockey club over the last few seasons.
It's changed, and everyone talks about the fan base, and you get no fans here. I was here in the early 90s. It was exploding, and you could start to see it come back last year. You see the same thing across in Tampa Bay, the culture that they've been able to create. It's booming Tampa Bay. You have that same sort of opportunity, but you have to win in South Florida. And we damaged the brand for 20 years. It was a brand that, if you maybe make the playoffs once every 8-9 years, why are you going to come watch that? Now you're set up where you've made the playoffs 3 consecutive years. You won the President's Trophy. It seems like you're in a situation where you have a window maybe of another 3-4 years where you should be in the playoffs and you should be able to knock on the door and chase a Stanley Cup. That's a situation this team has never, ever been in, to be there year in and year in, get in those playoffs, getting chances. And to the fans will come if you have that support and the expectations. They know they're there. They have the expectations. They have gone a lot higher, but just the buzz in general, it's fun to me being here in the early 90s and experiencing it, and to see it come back finally has been such an awesome feeling when you walk into the arena and sports and even get on talk radio. There's a buzz finally around this team.
Well, I can tell you there's going to be a buzz at the arena tonight when
that's
Pomo's
a tough place to play
on the bench, and cannot wait for it. Bill, really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I've always been a fan of your work, both on the ice and now in your new career in the media. Thanks for doing this. Enjoy the game tonight, and maybe we can do this later on this season.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Yeah, have fun tonight. Yeah, Paul back. That build, as I said, that 15,000 in there. Used to play in Old Miami Arena. That's what it held. And those barns it'll be noisy in there. So enjoy. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for doing this. There's Panthers analyst, NHL Network analyst Bill Lindsay with us, getting ready for Jets Panthers tonight. As Michael mentioned, Paul Maurice has spoken to the media today, and we will have Mike McIntyre join us in a little bit, and we'll hopefully get some of those comments a little bit later on as well on the program. Brandon Rewucki coming up as well. If you popped in a little bit late, obviously the big topic today is the game, and of course the return of longtime Jets head coach Paul Maurice. Hit us up in the chat or in the comments with your thoughts looking back on the Maurice era here in Winnipeg. And, of course, our friends at Not Auto Corp are the spot if you're thinking about a new vehicle. Whether you're looking to grab one or looking to upgrade your current one, talk to them about their great consignment program to save you the hassle and get you top dollar for your current vehicle. And as far as new vehicles, whether it's electric or traditional, so many great cars on the lot. Not to mention, if you're looking for a particular make and model that you've got your heart set on, talk to the experts at Knott. They'll source it for you, find it, and get it here to Manitoba and get you into it at the best possible price. And don't forget their winter tire specials, the MPI payment plan. Why not get safe winter tires and pay later right now at Knott Auto Corp? Pop down and see them, Waverly and McGillivray, and online at knott.ca. Holidays are here, folks, and I don't think I need to tell you that if you have a sports fan in the family, the number one spot that you need to be going to take care of all your holiday shopping is, of course, Royal Sports. The best selection of Jets merchandise, Bomber merchandise, merch from around the National Hockey League, not to mention Blue Jays, Raptors, NBA, National Football League with all 32 teams represented. They really do have it all. European soccer and, of course, World Cup as well. It's all there at Royal Sports. And then on the King Skate Snow and Surf side, some great clothing options, but a massive Yeti section makes for some great stocking stuffers. Take care of that Christmas list today at Royal Sports 750 Pembina Highway, and follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And hey, with the holidays around the corner, guys, maybe you're thinking it's about time heading into 2023 to upgrade that wardrobe a little bit. And I'll tell you what, an F Apparel gift card might be the perfect thing to ask for, especially right now as they've got their big sale heading into the holidays, where a $100 gift card, you get a 15% bonus and get $115 on it. Of course, F Apparel has the best custom suits in Winnipeg for men, starting at just $400. But more than just custom suits, golf pants, shirts, and more, all your men's accessories. Step up your wardrobe game at F Apparel. And of course, guys, if you're thinking about a wedding coming up in next year, talk to them about their great specials for wedding parties, where everyone will get a shirt with a minimum of 4 people in the party, a free shirt, as well as a 10% discount. F Apparel, 190 Smith Street downtown. Make an appointment or find out more online at that's EPH apparel.com. Let's get Michael Remis back in here because, Remo, before we talk to Mike, would love to hear a little bit more from the Winnipeg Jets, who had their morning skate and spoke before the Panthers did today. And maybe we could start off with Rick Bowness, because let's face it, all the attention is going to be on the visiting side of things with the coach, but it's been Rick Bowness that's made the big impact this year in Winnipeg. And Rick was asked today if it's just another game in the 82-game schedule.
Listen, Paul's an excellent coach, and he had a great run here, so you give him full marks for that. And he's doing a great job with Florida, so give him full marks for that. But for me, I've said this many times, and I'll say it every day, I keep the focus on our team and how we want to play, regardless who's coming in. And that's noise outside of the game. You start letting all that noise distract you, it affects the way you play. So we've talked enough about that. I just keep the focus on us, what we have to do to be successful tonight without bringing in all the other noise.
Yeah, well, there will be quite a bit of noise, I'm sure, around the arena tonight for many reasons. Lots of oxygen will be spent talking about the coaching matchup, but Bones did talk about the style of the Florida Panthers, who are coming in tonight to take on his Jets.
With the puck, they haven't changed. They're just flipping pucks out and getting to a lot of foot races, and they're getting the puck and they're going, which they did very well last year. The Paul's got them more of a 1-1-3 in the neutral zone, much what they did here last year. So without the puck, there's probably some differences. With the puck, it's an offensive-minded team that gets the puck and goes, and their D aren't always looking to make plays. And the wingers aren't looking for it. They're just going. They're going to flip it out. They're going to get into some foot races, and they hope they get in behind your D, because they're very dangerous. They have a lot of speed, they have a lot of skill, and it's going to be a fast-paced game out there unless we can control them in their zone.
All right, there's Rick Bowness on the visiting Panthers tonight. And one more from the coach. We will hear from Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele a little later on. We'll talk about it with Mike McIntyre coming up. Mikey Eyssimont getting an opportunity to crack the top 6 after beginning the season with the Manitoba Moose. Here is Bones on Eysimont's move up the depth chart and up the lines going into tonight's game.
When we first you guys had Alex Burrows here for a while, but Bird just came off that bench and just played his heart out. And now there's a different skill level and everything else here, and did experience and everything, but Burr brought what Mikey brings, what Burr did. Burr was a bigger guy, but he played that hard. You notice him every shift. He's always where he's supposed to be. He's always agitating somebody. So if you really watch him, you'd notice something he does pretty much every shift, and that's what we need him to do. And listen, he can make mistakes because he's working so hard. That's going to happen. We'll live with that, and we'll make those better. But the most important thing he brings is the energy. And that's what we need him to do.
Yeah, there's the key word on Mikey Eyssimont, the energy. And you've heard Rick Bowness at times question, where the emotion is, where the passion is. There's no question about whether Mikey Yesimon's bringing that each and every night, and maybe that'll be a good thing for his line mates and the players in the top six. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the return of Paul Maurice in tonight's game with Mike McIntyre. A very festive scene at the McIntyre household right now. Mike, what's going on? Great to talk to you again.
Well, just like Mikey Eyssimont, this Mikey always brings the passion as well. Mikey McIntyre, good to be here, Huss. You might get a Piper cameo. She's just eating her lunch right now, but she's in the vicinity, so you never know. She might just pop up here during our chat. But just got back from the rink. Obviously, a newsworthy morning down at Canada Life Center with the return of Paul Maurice, who spent about 20 minutes or so chatting with us ink-stained scribes. He said he misses us, and I kind of believe him, Huss. I don't imagine down in South Florida they get the kind of scrums that Paul Maurice had today with, it went multiple journalists deep and went on. And, we all know Paul Maurice, he's in his element, right? When he gets to talk and tell stories. I think it's crickets a lot of times, probably, in his own market, and then when they're on the road. So I got the sense that kind of happy to see us and happy to be back in the Peg. He'll be a lot happier, of course, if his Panthers can grab a couple points before they leave tonight.
Well, we'll get to this game in a minute, and of course the return of Maurice. But I have to ask you, Mike, I mean, you're there on a daily basis. How different was the atmosphere, and how would you describe it around both teams going into this game as opposed to a usual Tuesday night game against a team from the East in the middle of December?
Well, it's interesting. We tried to get some emotion out of the likes of Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. They were the two guys we requested today, and us, that wasn't by fluke. There's a reason that we wanted to speak with Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele. I think if you look at the Jets roster, they're probably the two players, most closely tied to Paul Maurice for a number of reasons. Neither of them really took the bait that we kind of tossed out there. And, to hear Scheifele and Wheeler talk, and even Rick Bowness to an extent, this is just another hockey game to them, and they're more focused on themselves than, who's behind the other team's bench. Mark Scheifele especially did not kind of want to go down that road at all, it seemed. We asked him a number of questions about, what kind of reception Paul Maurice might get tonight. What kind of reception should Paul Maurice get? And Scheifele did not want to really talk about that, which I thought was sort of interesting. He was asked a question at one point about the differences between then and now, Mark Scheifele, that is. And, it's almost what he didn't say that was most interesting. Like he heaped all kinds of praise on Rick Bowness and the current staff and all the things he said that they've brought, which we've wanted around here, which one could read into that and say that other guy that you're going to see tonight kind of fell short in that department. And, I don't think that's not breaking news, but it kind of reinforces the idea that, and kind of underlines what Paul Maurice said when he stepped down last year. This team needs a new voice. And I think we've seen Huss with the new voice that was correct. That assessment was bang on. And Rick Bowness, it would appear, is the right voice for this group right now. Which hasn't been very happy with its last two games. And so I think when we hear, the Jets today kind of play down the Maurice return, I think a part of that is because they're so frustrated with how they've played these last two. Yeah, they got the win against Anaheim, but, they did their very best in the first half of that game to kind of toss that one away. So I think we're going to see a real focused Jets team come out. As for Maurice, as I said, I mean, the Panthers, they're at the end of a very long road trip. And I get the sense that this is something he's very much enjoying, just being back in a city that meant so much to him, his family, his career. His daughter is still here. She's teaching at St. Mary's, Paul mentioned today. So I think there's going to be emotion, but it's probably going to be more on the Florida side and mainly on the Paul Maurice side. He said, I don't know how much the Panthers players are really getting caught up in this. I think for Paul Maurice, it's going to be a very emotional night. Seemingly for everybody else, it's going to be business as usual, another hockey game.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to say that. It's another thing for it to be true. And it is quite interesting. And we're going to hear a couple of clips from both Scheifele and Wheeler. And you mentioned Scheifele, kind of staying far, far away from it. Wheeler's another guy. I mean, Wheeler was often the guy that was thought of as Maurice's guy. He was the guy. He was the captain. He was the one that was sort of here, the keys to the locker room. And, with Rick Bowness coming in, a lot of that was sort of stripped down, including obviously the number off of his. How did Blake respond to the questioning today? And what did you gather from him as much as he would offer today when he met with the media?
Yeah, I mean, I think Huss, I won't describe them as hard feelings, but I think there's still some complicated feelings amongst Jets players. And I would think Blake Wheeler would be at the top of that list because of the relationship that he had with Paul Maurice, which we all know, these are coach and player. It wasn't a typical coach-player relationship. And, Blake in the past said he'd go through a wall for Paul Maurice, and he played like it. And, Paul Maurice obviously leaned on Blake Wheeler in a major way. And so I think the way that his tenure ended with, stepping down in the middle of the year, and don't forget, Blake had just got injured last year, so he wasn't even really around when Paul kind of pulled the chute. So I think there's just some complicated feelings that I get the sense that maybe haven't completely been worked through or resolved. It was interesting to hear Paul Maurice today say that he hasn't really talked to those guys very much at all in the near year that's kind of transpired here. I asked Mark Scheifele, are you going to go see Paul today? We see it all the time, Huss, when returning players come to town. You'll be down in the room after games, sometimes before games, and you see them, socializing. Mark said, no, I'm not. I don't plan to go see Paul, which I thought was interesting. This was not obviously a black and white, cut and dry kind of decision. And to me, Huss, one of the most interesting things that happened this morning down at Canada Life Center was Paul Maurice's answer to a question that I put to him, which was, do you have any regrets about the way your time in Winnipeg ended? And in hindsight, would you kind of do anything different the way it played out? And he said, yes, he would. And his big regret was not stepping down prior to last season. He said in hindsight, he probably should have done this the previous summer, that the writing was kind of on the wall, that he had taken this group as far as he possibly could, that his message was no longer resonating with them, and that he probably delayed this too long. And the way it played out, obviously, was very unfortunate for everyone, including Dave Lowry being put in that real tough spot. So some regrets for sure. And I also asked Paul Maurice about the decision to strip Blake Wheeler of the captaincy, which obviously was Rick Bowness's first big move coming to town. And interesting that Paul actually said he and Blake had previously talked about that very issue and when the time might come. And Paul said that we had agreed that once Blake turned 35, that was a conversation we were going to have. And so to hear Paul Maurice say it today, not to suggest that he would have done the same thing, but that was something that was going to inevitably happen, whether he was here or in this case, a new coach. And part of that, he said, was you hit a point in Blake's case where it's harder and harder to connect with some of the really young players on the team as that age gap widens. And these are conversations worth having. So, some insight kind of after the fact that I thought was interesting. But again, it seems like everybody's trying to really keep the focus on the 2 points at stake tonight and not get too caught up in nostalgia or rewriting history, if you will.
Well, yeah. And I mean, there's many different versions of the history of Paul Maurice, depending on who you talk to, as well as how it ended. Let me ask you this, and I kind of hit this at the top of the program, but I mean, I know a lot of people, and I mean, listen, the way it officially went down was Paul Maurice walked out and said, I'm done. It was the day of a game in December when the team was really struggling. And everyone was sort of, I remember when it happened. And I kind of thought that, okay, I mean, we'd have this conversation for a while. I mean, to me, this was an overdue move, dating back not to for that season, but the season before, and what happened at the end of 2019. And I definitely have time for the thought that, you know, listen, as opposed to firing Paul Maurice with everything that he meant to the organization, the relationships that they'd had, they allowed him to kind of walk away, keeping his head held high. And I would have more time for that if there was an obvious plan that they had to replace him as the head coach, because I think that the one thing that maybe disputes that was the fact that they were like, okay, Dave Lowry, come on in, creating one of the most awkward situations for team, player, Adam Lowry as well, and certainly the head coach, and we know what the results were. How do you see the end? Like, when you think back to that, I mean, is it basically as it was described to us, the Jets wanted him to keep going and he was their guy and he just decided that it was it, or was there more to it, or is the truth somewhere in the middle?
I think the truth's somewhere in the middle, but, you know, I'm with you, Huss. I personally believed at the time that this was closer to a case of, well, I'm not going to wait for you to fire me. I'm going to quit. But it was interesting, you know, we revisited that at the end of last season with Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I specifically asked him that question. I thought, you know, with the passage of time and that we'd maybe get closer to the full story, Kevin Cheveldayoff was adamant that he wasn't planning to fire Paul Maurice, and that had never really been talked about, which, you know, to me in some ways is almost maybe more troubling than anything here, because it does beg the question that if let's accept that, a little dogfight going on here, let's accept that that's the true story and that the Jets had no thoughts of replacing Maurice. Is it not troubling then that the coach himself, you know, and he's talking today about realizing even the previous summer that he should have failed. Is it not troubling that the coach could see it, but that his employers, you know, the GM, ownership, apparently could not? And then if Paul Maurice doesn't essentially fall on the sword, if that's what we're going to believe happened here, he doesn't do that, how long would they have allowed this to continue? Would Paul Maurice still be the coach of the Winnipeg Jets today, for example? And where would the Winnipeg Jets be? I mean, if Paul believes that he had taken this group as far as he could go, you know, had he communicated that to management, and were they pushing back on that? And I guess it gets into the whole issue of loyalty and how loyalty sometimes can be a bad thing. I mean, it can be very good in a lot of ways, but it also can come back to bite you. And that sort of blind loyalty that it would appear True North had with Paul Maurice. I mean, Paul Maurice may have done what the organization either couldn't or wouldn't. And I guess the question then is, why wouldn't they, or why couldn't they? And what other decisions maybe were they not making, or could they not make because of, say, loyalty? And, you know, again, I go back to Blake Wheeler and what Rick Bowness did. That's why I think in so many ways, Huss, Rick Bowness has been such a breath of fresh air. There's no BS. There's no cliches or you know, hollow victories or moral victories with Rick Bowness. I mean, he calls a spade, and when his team stinks like they did the other night, he's not coming in after the game talking about, well, it's great that we stayed in the fight and got the 2 points. No, he's flat out calling out his team. It's not right. These guys are professionals. I'm not a babysitter. Like, those are incredible quotes after a victory. But that speaks to the problems that I think were allowed to permeate within this organization under Paul Maurice, and problems and issues that to this day, Rick Bowness is probably still very much trying to undo. And in a lot of ways, maybe the last 2 games especially, he's realized some old habits do die hard around here, and he's still got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going to crap on the team. Listen, we know where they are in the standings, and it's been a pretty great start to the year. And I mean, they did bail themselves out on Sunday afternoon after a pretty ugly one on Friday night. But I am with you. I mean, it's been so refreshing, and it's been such a change to hear Rick Bowness say what everybody paying attention has sort of known needed to be said that wasn't a lot of times before. And it comes back to that word that I think was really lacking for a time towards the end of the Maurice era, and that was the accountability within the hockey club. There certainly wasn't anything public, and we can decide whether things were going on differently behind closed doors. The bottom line is certainly wasn't translating onto the ice with the desired effect of that level of accountability that you'd like to have. And it does make for such a stark juxtaposition between what we had heard, particularly over those last couple of years, and what Rick Bowness has done this year, even when the team has been winning hockey games.
For sure. And that's where I think process is almost more important right now to Rick Bowness, Huss. Process over results in some ways, because, Rick Bowness, ultimately it's a bottom line business, right? And you want to win. And the Jets have won a lot more than they've lost. But what Rick Bowness doesn't want to happen is what too often happened in the past, that the Jets, bad behavior would kind of get rewarded in ways around here. And then you fall into those bad habits and they don't change. And eventually it's not sustainable. And you have a team built on poor habits and, bad trends and that sort of thing. And then when push comes to shove, they just don't have it in them at the end of the season. So I think with him, he's recognizing there's some issues that they have to fix. There's still, and clearly we've seen some evidence, at least, that they're on the right path to fixing some of those problems. But I think these last 2 games, especially, or certainly the Columbus game and the first half of the Anaheim game, kind of underline some of that. And, it goes back to things like being prepared, starting on time, passion and emotion. Those are all things that Rick Bowness has been preaching from day one, playing on your toes, not on your heels. And, he's said it many times. I hate when teams play on their heels, when they sit back and let the other team kind of dictate how the game is going to be played. And the Jets didn't used to be that way, but I think in recent seasons and at times this year, that has become their MO. And Rick Bowness, he won't stand for it. So he's going to call it out. And it then comes down to how do the players respond. And I get the sense, that the players appreciate his candor. As he said many times before, he's not saying anything that to us in the media that he's not saying to the players behind closed doors. One can imagine he's a lot more candid behind closed doors. So I think this is what they wanted. They wanted accountability. They wanted transparency. And they wanted a coach who didn't, pull any punches, and they got it in spades.
Well, and Mike, we'll talk a little bit more about the game and the Winnipeg Jets lineup in a second, but just one more on Maurice. And I'm just interested in your perspective. I mean, the arc of Maurice here in Winnipeg is a long story. And I think, we talk about the loyalty. I really do believe that, right up to the top of Mark Chipman, I mean, he wanted his organization to be, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, where you are a consistent team, you establish a way of doing things, and you are not changing the coach all the time. Right. I mean, you go from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin. I mean, I really do think that was what they thought that they had with Paul Maurice, and that will explain part of the longevity of his. But when we look back, or when you look back, I mean, what are your takeaways from the 8 years of service of Paul Maurice to this hockey team and this community, now that we've had a little bit of time, almost a year, to step back from the way that it ended?
Well, I still think Paul Maurice did so much good for the organization, for the community. In a lot of ways, Huss, he solidified the Jets as a legitimate NHL team. I mean, don't forget, Claude Noel was the guy that True North, they brought with them from the AHL. And I think when you look at those early years, there was still that AHL feel to everything. Part of that was that loyalty again, that they just carried on the way they were kind of doing business, albeit now on a much bigger stage. But I think Paul Maurice brought that, instant respectability around the league. He was a big name and a big hire, and he certainly accomplished a lot of things with this team. He took them to new heights, and not just the team, the franchise. Don't forget the Thrashers franchise was a bit of a mess. Paul Maurice, oversaw the best years so far of the Jets 2.0 era, and first playoff appearance, first playoff series victory, second playoff series victory, and of course getting so close in the spring of 2018. So, I think that has to be part of the Paul Maurice big picture is where he took this team. But I think he's quite accurate in saying that, every coach, even the best coaches of all time, they have a shelf life, they have an expiry date. And it would appear Paul Maurice had hit his probably well before he left town. And, the Jets were just kind of treading water there for the longest time, stalling, obviously some personnel issues they had, some beyond their control, Dustin Byfuglien, Brian Little, some, letting some key players go. But I think, the time had passed. A new voice was needed. And I guess credit to Paul Maurice. I mean, again, when we look back on things, if the story that we've been told is true, and it was Paul Maurice, not the organization, that kind of realized it, well, Paul probably did everybody a huge favor then by doing something that True North wasn't ready or willing to do. And, in a sense, then he helped the Jets in another way. He's now helped usher in a new era that obviously everybody hopes will be even better than the Paul Maurice era.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Those final two seasons, Mike, are so weird. I mean, I kind of said earlier, certainly with the benefit of hindsight, the time, in my opinion, to make a move was after the 2019 season. I don't know what the hell happened with this hockey team, and maybe we'll never know around New Year's, where the team was one of the top teams in the league, and they played just with apathy for a good portion of the final half of the season and ended up bowing out in the first round in arguably the season where they had the best chance to actually win, even better than the year before, with the benefit of that experience. We can't forget about the pandemic coming in. It was sort of an up and down 1920 season, and then everything was up. But you're all right. And it's interesting that we hear Paul say that as much, that, an earlier exit probably would have been smart. And that's usually the way it works, I guess, when guys leave on their own volition. That doesn't just, just wake up one morning and say it's time to go. No. And it obviously been building for a long time. We had Bill Lindsay on earlier, and it's such a different team, a different market, but also a different challenge for Maurice now with this Panthers club, in that he's going into a team that, did make some pretty significant player personnel moves in the offseason, but they won the President's Trophy last year. This was a team, and he comes in with huge, huge expectations. And, from afar, I've been paying attention. I'm sure you have been too. It has been fascinating to see the pressure on Maurice from a Panthers fan base that I don't think ever has been very vocal before, as well as dealing with some pretty big faces out of the lineup that, and certainly like Barkov, and we've heard him mention that over the course of this. It hasn't been entirely smooth going into the new spot, especially considering what's expected of this team.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear Paul Maurice today almost suggest that everybody knew that was going to be the case this year, that there was going to be a step back. I guess it's one of those, you have to walk before you can run, or take a step back before you can take another step forward. He flat out said today, 122 points last year. We knew we weren't getting 122 this year. And then he said that he is a person that he felt could withstand some of that. And it almost sounds in a way, Huss, like, Bill Zito and the Panthers organization, in a lot of ways, brought Paul Maurice in, not just for what he can do kind of during a game behind the bench, but to kind of maybe absorb some hits, take some bullets, if you will, on what they felt was probably going to be, some adversity and some issues with how the season might play out and increased expectations. And I think at the end of the day, the Panthers, they're not going to be judged on how the regular season goes. Although I'll say this, if they miss the playoffs entirely, well, they will be judged on how the regular season goes because that's their whole season. But I think the idea is this is a team that they want to have sustained playoff success. They kind of crashed and burned last year. And I think part of the Andrew Brunette criticism with the Panthers is that kind of when the going got tough in the playoffs, he got out coached by a guy like John Cooper, didn't make the adjustments that were needed within a playoff series. And they ultimately got out coached and fell short. Is that fair? Probably not. The Tampa Bay, that was not an upset. I know the Panthers had more points. The Lightning were 2-time defending champs. That was not an easy matchup for anybody. Brunette obviously kind of pays the price for it, and good on him now. He's an associate in New Jersey, pretty much the best team in the NHL. So he's landed on his feet. And, I think in Paul Maurice's case, again, we know how good of a communicator he is. He can seemingly talk his way out of anything. And I think part of that is Paul Maurice. They know that, he's got thick skin. He's kind of survived, you could say thrived in a Canadian market. Obviously a much different atmosphere down in Florida. But the feeling was that he was the right guy for the job. And, certainly a lot of fans in Florida who read social media, they don't really buy that. They pin a lot of what's happening this year on the Panthers, the inevitable step back that Paul Maurice talked about, directly on Paul Maurice. And is that fair? Probably not. It is interesting, and Paul Maurice noted today, Huss, the Panthers actually have tremendous analytics. Unlike many of the Paul Maurice Winnipeg Jets teams that had terrible analytics and still found ways to win, almost the reverse is happening in Florida. They got great analytics, and they're not winning as much as obviously people would like. Part of that, I suspect, is who they've had out of the lineup. Part of that is just the mentality. They put pucks to the net like nobody else does in the league. So, you're going to have pretty good analytics when you're constantly just firing rubber at the other team's net nonstop from wherever you are. But, like I said, it's early for Paul Maurice. I imagine he's got a longer leash than probably some would like in Florida. But there's no question this has not been the start that at least fans of the Panthers were hoping for after a President's Trophy winning year.
No doubt about that. Mike McIntyre, the Winnipeg Free Press, with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. We knew that was going to be the case. We were going to spend most of the time talking about the guy coming with the visitors on the bench. But just quickly, Mike, the Jets, you kind of laid it out. I mean, salvaged the weekend with the second half of that Anaheim game. You were down there today. You felt the vibe around the team. You talked to Mark Scheifele. You talked to Blake Wheeler. What do you expect from this Winnipeg Jets club tonight when they drop the puck?
Yeah, I expect they're going to come out in the first period like a team that knows they're under a microscope on how they come out after two straight really poor starts. Paul Maurice talked about his team, the Panthers. One of their strengths, he said, this year has been the way they've started games. He said one of their weaknesses is how they finished a lot of games. They've let some leads slip, blown some games in the third period. But he said, I think today he said, can think of maybe 2 games so far this year that he hasn't liked their first period. So I'm sure Rick Bowness has now told his group that the Panthers are going to be ready to play. Are you? And as Rick Bowness said the other night, Huss, I'm tired of talking. I'm tired of just hearing players say the right things. I want to see the right things. So, they kind of got the dressing down on Friday. Then they came out Saturday, said all the right things, then kind of did all the wrong things in how they started Sunday. I'd be stunned personally if we saw that again. That doesn't mean they're going to come out and blow the Panthers out, or it doesn't even mean they're going to win the game, Huss. I just would be shocked based on what we've got to know about Rick Bowness and, the way this team works. I'd be stunned if they come out and kind of lay an egg in the first period. So I think, again, despite them kind of downplaying the importance or the emotion of having Paul Maurice in the building, I imagine all the guys that played for Paul Maurice are going to want to come out and not necessarily stick it to him, but they're going to want to show that, life is pretty good since you pulled the plug on us. And they got a chance to do that, right in front of them tonight. And so, again, I expect the Jets will come out looking like a pretty determined team. And if the Panthers come out with kind of equal determination, it should make for an absolute dandy of a game tonight.
I'm sure you'll have plenty to write about in the Freep tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. In fact, so much. So I'm going to kind of do a couple days worth of pieces here, kind of do the story on Paul's return and how that goes. And I think tomorrow I'll tackle a bigger picture column on kind of looking at some of the differences, some of the similarities between kind of the Bowness and the Maurice eras, kind of once the dust has settled and we see how tonight plays out. But you're right, no shortage of material to work with, between Patrick Laine last Friday, and he, of course, had the big night, and now Paul Maurice. Been an interesting few days around here for kind of meaningful games in terms of who's been in the building. So I'm sure the Jets, they just want to focus on hockey, and they're probably happy to kind of hit the road for a couple anyways after tonight.
Mike, thanks so much for doing this. All the best to you and the fam.
You bet, Huss. Take care.
There's Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press. We're going to continue the conversation with Brandon Rewucki coming up in just a second. I do have to give a huge thank you to the wonderful support we get, though, from Princess Auto. Of course, our bomber and curling reports all season long, brought to you by Princess Auto. And with the holidays here, there's someone in the family that loves. I don't know if there's ever been a sponsor where people are as passionate about the store as Princess Auto. And that's why the reason is that you got the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto, a great spot to start all of your holiday shopping for the right person in the family. Of course, there's 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road and Portage Avenue West. But maybe the best way to go about it is to get online, and you can shop 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Hey, I know the holidays are here. There's going to be all sorts of things on the lists, but let's not forget water, because that is something that we all need. Great water services 12 months a year. And the experts at Culligan have been the go-to people for that for over 65 years in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. Culligan's got everything you and your family need. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions for your business. Pop down and see them in person at 1200 Sargent Avenue. You can give them a call at 204-694-5180 and check out all the water products and services they can have for your family online at drinkculligan.com. Well, and, with the snow falling and Christmas just around the corner, there's going to be some entertaining and obviously maybe the odd gift that will be popped by the Manitoba liquor marts. And when you do that, make sure to check out, first of all, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club, the Icon. But you Bomber fans are going to want to get there now as well, because right now with Jim Beam sales, buy a bottle of Jim Beam and get an exclusive collector Blue Bomber glass. Last year was Willie Jefferson on them. This year, Zach Caleros, Adam Bighill, and Nick Dembski, available at the 20 biggest liquor marts in the city right now, free with your purchase of Jim Beam. Huge thanks to Canadian Club Jim Beam. We remind you to celebrate the holidays safely and do not drink and drive. And hey, big night tonight for the Jets. If you're not going to the game, the next best spot to watch it is at Boston Pizza with those great Jet specials, pick a player and more. And then, of course, on Thursday, one of your final chances to enter for the big Boston Pizza Thursday and Monday night football package. of a trip for two down to Vegas to see the Raiders and Niners on New Year's Eve weekend and a bonus NHL game. And while you're there, check out all the great new menu items as well. And of course, don't forget Appy Hour from 3 to 6 and 9 to 12 at your local Boston Pizza. And if you're staying home, order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, let's welcome in Brandon Rewucki, host of the Skates and Plates podcast. Lots to get to with Brandon. B, what's going on, man? Great to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Good to see you back in on home soil there, and doing kind of doing some parenting duty right now. Bluey has taken over for the next 15 to 20 minutes, so hopefully things are going good in the room next to me. But if you hear some footsteps and some screaming in about 15 or 20, should be fine until then. But yeah, right now we got a couple of blue dogs taking care of the little ones.
Well, that's good. The good thing it's not the Swiss soccer team right now, because it is 5-1 right now for Portugal. You take Ronaldo out of the lineup and look what you get from the Portuguese. There you go. Listen, we'll get to the soccer in the next couple days as we look forward to the next round in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. But today's the day, December 6th, the return of Paul Maurice. Very interesting hearing Mike, who was down at the building today, talk about almost a stoic nature of Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele today. And then on the other side of things, I mean, a Panthers team that themselves, I don't know if they're going to really be particularly fired up for this, but a special day and a sort of a weird day that I think, Paul knew was coming, but, certainly is a big deal. I mean, let's start off with this. How do you, like, now that we're a year removed from it, looking back, how do you think about the way things went down? Are they as they were sort of presented to us, that this was just Paul Maurice saying, you know what, I was done? Or was this maybe a nice way to have a respected guy walk out as opposed to being fired like usually happens with most NHL head coaches?
I mean, if we're gonna try to go Occam's razor on this, and what the most simplest answer to all, would it not be that he was given a choice of either being fired or having the choice to resign? Because it doesn't make any sense, looking back, that, I need some time away, and what's that? 2 months later, I got a job out there in Florida. All right, see ya, good to go. Right? Like I don't know. It never passed the.
Well, the thing was, he did say that this team, I mean, the message isn't getting through anymore, which was absolutely correct. Everybody knew that was the case. I mean, I remember when it happened, I kind of was really thinking like, oh, well, this is a way of kind of, making a soft landing, if you will, as opposed to get out. But then when you saw what happened with the rest of the season and the fact that they were probably, well, they obviously were not prepared to make that change, and Dave Lowry got thrust into the role, and the lack of effect it had on the team, and I think the negative effect it had on some players, particularly a very important player like Adam Lowry, I think it sort of speaks to that. I mean, regardless of how it went, the last couple games, and Mike just brought this up, I mean, what we heard from Rick Bowness, as well as after a win on Sunday, just such a stark contrast to what we heard, particularly in the last few years of Paul Maurice here in Winnipeg.
Yeah. And again, accountability being at the forefront of all of this, right? And I love that even more so when it comes after a win. And I guess a convincing one on the scoreline by the time the game ultimately came to an end there. But there was no parade being run after that, right? It wasn't, hey, we got the 2 points, we'll figure it out, all good. It was, this is unacceptable. Like there are standards that need to be enforced here, and it's not going to be like this moving forward. So I think honestly, Rick Bowness this entire season has had one bad night, and that would have been the end of the third against Carolina. Other than that, though, he's really pushed all the right buttons, hasn't he? And I think he continued to do that over the weekend. You have what you had hoped was a one-off loss against Columbus, and then with the way they started out there against Anaheim, I mean, he let it be known during the game, unacceptable. And then despite getting the 2 points, again, unacceptable, and this isn't going to happen anymore. And look, anybody that's watched this team last year compared to this year knows it's a breath of fresh air. It's just it's a completely different message that's resonating with the players. And you touched on what happened in the second half of last season, specifically. Two different bench bosses were not able to get the message through to these players here. So the winter of bones continued in a big way at Canada Life Center Sunday.
Yeah, and you know what? Listen, I don't even know if it's fair to judge Dave Lowry on the second half of last season. That was a no-win situation. I mean, he was thrown in there, and I mean, if his son wasn't on the team, we're probably talking about a very, very different group. But you talked to Adam afterwards, heard from Dave. I mean, just that's not the way you draw it up to turn a season around, and it didn't. And I think it maybe goes to the show that that really was Paul Maurice just walking away. All that being said, we know where this team is and what we've seen so far from them this year. And I'm not sure whether you heard Wheeler or Scheifele speak today, but both of them didn't really want to go there. And Mark Scheifele, often Mike specifically asked, will you go see Paul afterwards? No, there hadn't really been any contact from that. It's really interesting because for so long, those were the guys that, were at least perceived as Maurice's guys. And then there was everyone else. I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on that, but I do ask you what you think we'll see from the Winnipeg Jets, both considering the way they played in the last couple games and what we heard from their head coach, but also the fact that there's a very familiar face on the opposition bench.
Yeah, I think you'll see a big number on the board tonight. I'll tell you that much. It'll be a hell of a party at some point in the season for those guys, and I wouldn't mind being the board in this one before the game in the dressing room. I'll tell you that much. I haven't heard Scheifele and Wheeler's comments. I saw a little bit of it, so I don't. I always like to kind of watch and listen to it before making a final assessment on that. But I when it comes to Scheifele, at least, I don't really have a ton of surprise with that, mainly from what he said at the start of training camp, right? When he was talking about his relationship with Bones, saying something along the lines of, it's great to be able to communicate with somebody, right? Like, I think he made it pretty clear that by the time the relationship had run its course last season, that there wasn't it wasn't a come in and talk anytime sort of a partnership between him and the head coach. Well, Wheeler's a little more interesting because, and again, I haven't totally heard everything that he said before the game today, but I mean, you would imagine that he got along pretty well with Paul Maurice right until the end, right? Like that was his locker room. Paul Maurice kind of stepped back and said, "Hey, you're the one that's going to be running things here. I trust you to handle it." And away we go. And the ice time that he was, given as a result of that, pretty clear that was Blake Wheeler's team. And Paul Maurice played arguably the biggest role in making that happen. So look, I think there's going to be the majority of the team. I don't know if pissed off is necessarily the right word, but I think they're ready to go in this one. Like, I think the combination of Anaheim and how that game started with the fact that they can stick it to Paul Maurice in this one, I'll be pretty shocked if we don't see maybe like an 18-shot first period and the Jets pop a couple in here. I think this is that there won't be a lack of motivation to start the game. I think that's probably the safest way to put it.
Yeah, I think it was BA in chat saying this might be a good day to throw 55 to 26 down on your DraftKings lineup tonight because I have a feeling those guys will be. And I'll say this about Wheeler. He was Maurice's guy. He was the captain. And, for a while, I think when he was the captain, there was Wheeler and Buff, and that was the sort of the yin and the yang in the dressing room. And, when Bufflin left, there's a lot of things that changed on the ice, but I think that maybe would have happened as well. The one thing I'll say, and I'm not sure this is entirely fair to Blake, is that once Maurice left, he was the leader, he was the guy, many of those problems still remained. And all of a sudden, certainly to a big section of the Jet fan base, it was all on him. And he sort of became the lightning rod that the head coach was, and then the head coach left. And I can't say enough about the way he's handled the what he's been handed this year. He's a proud guy. He's the franchise leader in games played. I mean, he has done so much for this team. Many of the things that you hear people say about Maurice, I'll say even more so for Blake Wheeler. And to handle everything that's been sent his way and to be playing just shy of a point a game right now and back up with Scheifele producing, it is a fascinating. I always like to use wrestling terms, but I mean, for a while, Wheeler was a little bit of the heel with Winnipeg Jet fans. And there's been a bit of a face turn where I think people are realizing and appreciating what he has done this year, knowing that he's on the back nine of his career, knowing that he wasn't expecting a role maybe that he's in right now, but making the most of it. And the bottom line is the team's winning hockey games.
Yeah, and especially, you touched on the Portugal game where they've got a pretty big veteran presence that they decided to take out of the lineup to make a bit of a statement too, right? So interesting how two different vets have handled that in two different situations there. I mean, I think Wheeler's been as good as you could have hoped for this year, right? Like, what more realistically could you have asked out of him? We all know he's not the player that he was 4 years ago, and that he's, maybe even a bit of a luxury at this point, especially with the cap hit there. But, he's, for the majority of the season, kind of brought along Cole Perfetti. He provided a decent bit of scoring punch inside that second line into the top six for Winnipeg. And when given the opportunity, I think he's been able to run the power play pretty good as well. So, I mean, on the ice and everything like that in terms of his performance, he's been, I think, as good as he could have hoped for. But, there was definitely a scenario, and I talked about you with this before the season got started. There was a maybe very likely or a likely scenario that what the Jets did in taking the C away from Blake Wheeler and putting him on the trade block and all that everything blew up in their face, right? Like, he could have been a very, very difficult person to deal with, and things could have gone sideways really quickly. But I think he does deserve a fair amount of credit. I think he deserves a fair amount of blame for some of the things that have taken place over the past 2 or 3 seasons. But I think at the same time, he deserves a lot of credit for how he's handled himself so far this year. And it's just been, let's try and keep everything under the radar and keep things going. We'll see how his game progresses as the games start to pile up here. But I think as far as what you could have realistically hoped for this season, this is probably best case scenario for Blake Wheeler and the Jets.
We talk about Wheeler, and we got to get to Scheifele right now. And maybe this is just my perspective, and everyone sees things a little differently. But I will admit, I'm sort of stunned at everything that has transpired with Mark since Paul left. Well, not the way that what happened last season and the way the season ended, but everything that he has said about really like a lack of communication and a lack of relationship. Because for all the talk about wanting accountability, when we talked about that last year, what were we talking about? We were talking about the guys, the top players that needed to be accountable for playing the way that the other guys in the lineup were expected to do. And listen, he's bought in. Speaking of face turns, I mean, he's had one of the great turnarounds considering the way things ended last year. If you would have told me we'd be talking about a team, being led by Scheifele and with the team knocking on first place, I would have said, well, what miracle happened? Well, I mean, I guess Rick Bowness has been that guy. But, in retrospect, looking back, I mean, it's obvious that all things weren't exactly as they seemed. And, that to me is one of the most interesting takeaways about the end of the Maurice era into today. And, the 11 months that have transpired with the ups for Scheifele, with the downs first, and now the ups right now, along with the trajectory of the hockey team.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Because in my opinion, you had a guy last year that for being a hockey nerd didn't want to put in the effort. It wasn't a matter of skill or talents or anything like that. He just didn't want to play.
There was no buy-in.
Hard things, right? Like, and I was on board with, honestly, moving the entire leadership group out and kind of starting anew here, because I just didn't think it was going to be possible to have a coach come in and then the players do a complete 180 and that's it. No additional moves made, essentially, and we just roll with the same group and see what happens. Well, what's happened is they've held up their end of the bargain, and quite honestly, they've kind of made Kevin Cheveldayoff look like a bit of a genius in this. Like he bet on them in a big way, maybe even bet his job on them, to be quite honest as well. Because a lot of people, myself included, would have completely understood, look, this isn't going to happen. We're not allowing this anymore, and we're going to try to create something new here in Winnipeg. But he said, no, I think these guys have what it takes. Maybe a different voice is going to be the impetus for that. And it 100% has been that so far. And I think Mark Scheifele 1,000% has led the way. He's been the key figure in all of this. And it's wild to say too, because what is he, 5th in team scoring, right? Yeah. Under a point a game. and people always make the weird thing when you play better defensively, you sacrifice offense. That's a load of crap. But having said that, it goes to show how much more impactful he's been, right? And that, he's not on pace for 95 points this year. And he's not on pace for a Selke nomination either. Don't get me wrong. But the effort, the commitment, the attention to detail, all of that is there in a huge way for him. And I've been really, really impressed with what he's done so far. And, I thought, especially with the contract situation, potential big payday on the line, could this maybe be the beginning of the end for Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg? I think this, again, a big-time 180. A lot of Jets fans might have been thinking that, and at this point now, you're probably starting to go, well, we don't know what's going on with Dubois. Wheeler's at the tail end of his career. Maybe it is time to make Mark Scheifele a lifelong member of the Winnipeg Jets franchise. And I never in a million years, like last year, that would have been laughable. And now it's like, man, you kind of feel like you're almost forced into doing it at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, regardless of when they make that decision, there's one more year on the contract, and I mean, it still will be a very, very tough decision to make because it's going to cost you a lot of money. And, Mark Scheifele is going to be 31 at that point. And, you wonder, is this a guy that, if it's a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year deal, where does that take you? And we already heard Scheifele talk and refer to the Wheeler deal as like a legacy contract, which he certainly earned. But, there are pros and cons to it all. But you're exactly right. The possibility of that is exponentially greater than it seemed at the end of last season. It's going to be interesting tonight. Will be a lot of memories, a lot of talk of what's happened in the past. But for the present right now, the Jets are knocking on the door of first place, and they got a good team coming in regardless of who the head coach is. It should be great. Brandon, just give a quick plug on what's coming up on Skates and Plates for the peeps.
Yeah, it's coming out tomorrow, actually. I'm off to FLA later on this week, so I appreciate you allowing me to reschedule.
Nicely done.
Yep. So I'll be, it'll be just a quick breakdown of the game. Don't know if it's going to be Bones versus Maurice as maybe like the headliner of the matchup here, but I'm sure there'll be a few talking points in this one. I'm pretty excited. And I'll tell you what too, just quickly. I did an appearance on a Florida Panthers podcast over the weekend. And
how are they doing?
Take this for what it's worth. There was a lot of questions centered around when will the Florida Panthers fire Paul Maurice and what the coaching change. They are not a happy bunch right now. There may not be many of them, but they're a passionate group.
They're
right
loud.
Now.
Well,
and they're not happy with the record. I do think the team's playing a little bit better than their record might suggest, and I think that they might be a bit of a sleeping giant in the second half of the season because they found the secret sauce of don't play Sergei Bobrovsky in goal. But just interesting, right? That there's a lot of the same conversations and questions in the last year or 2 years of Maurice's tenure in Winnipeg are being thrown out there in the first 2 months of his tenure in Florida.
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, man, you go into that situation with all that player personnel movement for a team that was the top of the league in the regular season. And, Maurice is there to get the team over the finish line in the playoffs right now. Well, that doesn't include taking a step back in the regular season. And I do get that. By the way, missing Barkov the way they are right now, probably not helping, but I'm here for it tonight because this is a big game for the home squad. Thanks for doing this and have a great trip. We'll talk to you when you get back.
Beauty. Sounds good. Have a good week.
Good stuff. There's Brandon Rewucki. Make sure you're following and subscribing to Skates and Plates wherever you get your favorite podcasts. All right. We are going to play some of those clips. We'll hear from Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler coming up in just a minute. Before we do that, the holiday season is here. And I'll tell you what, there's all sorts of great desserts you can have for family gatherings, but I'll tell you what, not many of them can hold a candle to the Nick and Nicky DQ and a DQ ice cream cake. Whatever your holiday plans are, why don't you hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba or give them a call at one of their 4 locations, DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Pula Park, or DQ St. Anne's, and get a festive ice cream cake for the family over the course of the holidays. Of course, DQGC is also a great stocking stuffer, and 12 months a year. A Blizzard, a Stack Burger, maybe some of those honey barbecue chicken fingers, always great for a quick stop off for a sweet treat for you. And of course, the other thing that goes great with the holidays is Winnipeg's favorite beer, Little Brown Jug. Now, I would suggest at some point over the next couple of weeks, you head down in person to the brewery and tap room on William Avenue. Some great holiday events happening there as well. You can check out at littlebrownjug.ca. Try all your favorite beers. Pick up the Good Times Variety Pack. festive style, as well as the 1919 and your other favorite beers for entertaining, or maybe a gift for the beer lover in the family. But also check out the amazing Little Brown Jug merchandise they have there as well. Also, it's all available online at littlebrownjug.ca for citywide delivery. And the next time you pop in one of your favorite beer stores, make sure to check out 1919 and the best local beer, Little Brown Jug. All right, let's get Remis back in here. And Reem, man, this has been a blast from the past today. I'm really looking forward to this game today, but I knew we'd have some interesting conversations. And started off with Bill Lindsay from a Panthers standpoint of, a kind of an up and down season. As Rewucki mentioned, I mean, analytically, they've been doing good. They've been getting lots of shots. Their shot share is good. But as Bill said, they probably had about as bad of a record as you could have when you're playing like that. Now you lose some key players, up and down goaltending, at least with Bobrovsky. And this team's right now in a dogfight in one of the toughest divisions in the National Hockey League.
That's been a problem with the Panthers. They can't score, and it does kind of remind me of the Jets last year before he stepped away. I think they got shut out by like Stuart Skinner and Karel Vejmelka and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen on Buffalo. They couldn't score, and their goalies weren't making a save, and they've gone away from Bobrovsky, who's making $10 million a year, and Spencer Knight's getting the start. I think they're going to go majority with him going forward. But for the Panthers now, they do have a number of injuries. We've talked about Barkov, Anton Lundell, who's taken a bigger role with them. He's out, and Duclair and Hornqvist remain out as well. So I think not as bad as Colorado, because Colorado had a lot of injuries, but the Panthers do have some significant ones. But I think they have played better hockey than the record when it can. I think that was a fair statement from Bill Lindsay.
You got it. All right, let's get to some of these clips. We get to the Coolbet lines and some of the other notes from sports, but it's all about the Jets and Panthers today and the return of Paul Maurice. And Mark Scheifele met the media today. We'll start off with 6, Remo. Or actually, no, let's start with Wheeler. Let's just go with 4. Blake Wheeler, longtime Jets captain under Paul Maurice, was asked if tonight is just another game.
Yeah, I think we're, the last 2 games haven't been the way we wanted to play, so it's a good opportunity for us against a really good team tonight. And obviously, having Paul back there, would be a good reception for him tonight. Everything he's done for this organization as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you've talked at length in the past about what Paul has meant to you in your career. So will there be extra emotions for you, and do you think for him as well?
I'm sure for him, I'm still here. For Paul, like I said, he invested a lot into this organization, and, the amount of time he spent, kind of helping us build and get to a point where we can be competitive and, have a chance to win. I'm sure it'll be a special night for him to come back and spend some time in a town that, he and Mitch, made their home for a lot of years.
I love that line from Wheeler. I'm still here. Here's one more from Wheels, who just talked about tonight's game and the challenge of the Panthers.
We're focused on our room and ourselves, and like I said, a couple of games that weren't up to our standard, and we were fortunate to turn it around in the second period their last game and get a win. But we expect more out of ourselves, so hopefully we can get off to a good start tonight and have a good night tonight.
All right, there's Blake Wheeler, certainly echoing the message from Rick Bowness that we all heard loud and clear after the game against the Anaheim Ducks. And we will think and expect that they'll have a much better start tonight against a much better opponent in the Florida Panthers. Let's move on to Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele was, as Mike mentioned, one of the other players the media was hoping to talk to on the return of Paul Maurice. Scheifele was asked about what it'll be like going up against his former longtime head coach.
Yeah, it's definitely a little weird. Having him for 9.5 years is a long time. So obviously it's weird having him on the other side, but you just got to treat it like any other hockey game. It's their team's been rolling on this road trip, and we got to be prepared for it.
All right, so Mark Scheifele, lots of questions about Maurice. Here's one on just this season with him being gone and now him being in South Florida, if he pays any extra attention to his new team, the Florida Panthers.
I think I pay attention to kind of the whole league. Obviously, Florida's a team that made a lot of changes. Obviously, the Huberdeau, Uyghur for Tkachuk trades was pretty substantial over the summer. So you definitely pay stock in that. And like I said before, they've had a good little run on this road trip. So we got to be prepared for a team that's feeling good, and we got to get out to a good start and stick to that all night.
All right, Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets. This was the question that Mike McIntyre mentioned when Mark Scheifele, his answer when he was asked if he'll meet up with Maurice today while he's here.
I have no idea. I don't really, you don't spend a whole lot of time talking to the other team. So, probably not. But, this is just another game. It's a big test for us. We didn't really like our last game, so we got to be prepared for a big test here and focus on this Winnipeg Jets team and nothing else.
All right, there's Mark Scheifele, and one more from Scheif, who was asked by one of the media. I'm not sure who it was, but asked about the difference between Bones and Pomo.
You see the similarities, the differences, and I think this year's been completely different. It's a whole new perspective on things, and Bones and his staff has done a great job at challenging this team and pushing us to our max. And I think that's what every guy wanted here, was to be pushed and challenged and helped and coached. And I think Bones has done a fantastic job at that. And we're looking forward to it. It's only a quarter way into the season, and we still have lots to learn. We still have lots to work on, and that's exciting as a hockey player. We've only had that perspective for 20 games now, and we have so much more to learn and so much more knowledge to be given. So I think that's exciting for all of us.
All right, so there's a little bit of Mark Scheifele's meeting with the media today. We do have a couple clips from Maurice, so let's get to those next, Remo. First thing we've got here is Paul Maurice reacting to Rick Bowness being hired and being the new guy here in Winnipeg.
I think there were probably 2 or 3 names, and I followed it, and Rick would be one of them. Somebody that does a really good job at getting down to the, pardon the pun, the bones of it, to get to the structure of it, the skeleton of fixing some basic things and getting a real simple kind of mindset in all 3 zones, real consistent game. I think he did that in Dallas as well. Bit of a defensive bent on it. Got a real good goaltender here, so it was structured right. When Dallas was kind of rolling with their goaltending too, it was kind of very similar.
And there's Paul Maurice on Rick Bowness, and again, a big thanks to Florida Hockey Now for this audio. Our friend George Richards getting that out. One more from Florida Hockey Now. And this was the question that Mike McIntyre referred to as Paul asked if he had any regrets with the way that he left Winnipeg.
I'd have got off the bench in the summer. Yeah. Prior. If I was to do something, to be honest, if I was going to go do something different, it would be that.
How come? Why do you say that?
Because you can see it. I mean, I was in a very unique position to see it. I could see it in the summer, right? And then you go run 8-9 years, and we'd gone from not winning a playoff game to banging out 114 points one year, and you kind of hit that crest, and then it was time.
All right, so there's a little bit of Paul Maurice, who will be the center of attention, I'm sure, leading up to puck drop tonight, and then it'll be about the Winnipeg Jets and the Florida Panthers going at it. And, of course, a very interesting and intriguing coaching matchup between former Jets head coach Paul Maurice and current Jet head coach Rick Bowness. All right, I do have to get to a couple of other things outside of hockey in this game tonight before we go, but let's quickly get to the Coolbet lines. By the way, Remo, I had to Barry Horowitz myself. Crack the top 20 of the Coolbet standings in Canada today. So it's one of the cool things of the features of the website. You can see how you're doing compared to other folks. And as I say, between the World Cup and the NFL and the Lock Shop, it's been a good run right now. If you haven't played a Coolbet before and you would like to, use the promo code WST on your first deposit. And there it is, 19. I'm not joking. And you can check these. You can check those last. That's wild. That's like over like 2.5 years. Yeah, it's been good. And you can check those last 5 tickets as well. Yeah, there it is. And I got to give a shout out to Justin Bourne, who came up with another great winner in the exclusives page with the Rangers and Flyers yesterday. And those are the ones that are boosted, so you're getting a better number. But maybe my favorite one of the year was the Monday night snooze fest. My favorite primetime bet, over 3.5 field goals, along with the under, was plus 300. So that was a beauty.
Sorry, I'm muted. How often does that one hit? Because seems like you're betting over 4.5 field goals, like 3.5 every week, and it always
put
hits.
It this way: I have no idea how it's still plus money, because it has to have been hitting like 70-75% of the ones that I've actually been on. I usually just do that for the primetime games, although I did throw it in on the Raiders-Chargers game on the weekend, and it came through again. We'd have to go do the numbers, but it's been a heavy winner. So if you're ever looking at one of these junky primetime games and are thinking, look for that over 3.5 field goals. And you'll be happy when they bring the field goal unit out and we get another dud game like last night. We'll get to that game in a second. A big night, though, tonight in the National Hockey League. Let's go right down to the Jets game and the Florida Panthers. The Jets are a home dog. Plus 102 at home. Panthers minus 120. And the Jets, if we want to go the opposite line, Jets to win by 2, plus 250. Pretty juicy number on that game tonight. As I said, I want this game bad. I think most fans do. Maybe I'll just stay away from it, and it'll be the emotional hedge. Just go and enjoy the game, and hopefully they win. But plus money on the Jets to win, and minus 250 if you want to get them to win by 2. Other games tonight, man, Remo, when was the last time we had a minus 410 favorite in the National Hockey League? I can't remember. The Devils at home to the Blackhawks tonight. Puck line minus 2.5 at plus 120 for the Devils. That is crazy. Kings and Sens, Ottawa minus 116 home favorite. Pittsburgh a big minus 288 favorite against the depleted Columbus Blue Jackets. Lightning minus 233 against the Detroit Red Wings. St. Louis coming off a tough loss. They had a 4-3 lead in the third against the Rangers. They lost 6-4 last night. They're plus 147 in on Long Island against the Islanders. Florida and the Jets, as we mentioned. Jets plus 102. Basically a pick'em between the Dallas Stars and the Toronto Maple Leafs. In Dallas, Hurricanes, a big road favorite, minus 282 against the Anaheim Ducks. Kraken and Habs. By the way, what a crazy game last night. Habs up 4-0 early in Vancouver. Canucks come back to win 7-6. Kraken minus 276 favorites against Montreal to round out today's action. And as far as the World Cup goes, we're now ready for the final 8, the quarterfinals. Croatia, Brazil. Brazil a massive favorite after their big win yesterday. Argentina plus 122 against Netherlands. Portugal just put up half a dozen on the Swiss. I cannot believe that. Portugal minus 143. And England and France Saturday afternoon. What a scene that is going to be. Get to your pub early if you want to take that one in. France plus 148, England plus 210, and the draw in regulation time plus 228. And just trying to see if we've got, I guess they'll be recalibrating the odds. They've still got specials on all the remaining teams, and of course, to win the tournament. All there at Coolbet. Big thanks to our friends at Coolbet. And of course, make sure you're checking out the Lock Shop. All those picks that we've been doing well at, I'm throwing them out daily at Lock Shop Bets on Twitter. And check out the YouTube channel. We just launched it a couple weeks ago. Growing. We're giving away $1,000 when we get to 1,000 subscribers. So make sure you subscribe to the Lock Shop today. Remo, hey, before we go, a few other things we want to get to. But yeah, how about that Canucks Habs game last night?
Yeah, I saw. It's funny. Vancouver's down 4-0. Every Vancouver reporters oh, this team is a trash can. They're a mess. They need to get rid of everyone, do something. Then all of a sudden, they win 7-6 in overtime. Most notably, Elias Pettersson burning Michael Matheson in overtime. And then a lot of people pointing out that it was Matheson who gave a sidewalk slam to Paterson a couple of years ago when he was with the Florida Panthers, and Paterson offering a no comment, asked if he knew who he burned in overtime. So some storylines there.
Chances are that he did.
Yes.
A couple big moves in Major League Baseball free agency. Jacob deGrom spurns the Mets and goes to Texas. So Cohen rolls out the checkbook and signs Justin Verlander to a 2-year deal, I believe, with a 3rd-year option. Nearly $40 million a season for the Cy Young Award winner, going to the Mets. And Trey Turner signs with the Phillies. What was this, an 11-year deal?
Yeah, Trey is 11 years, 333 million, 300 million. Sorry, 300. So the money getting thrown around in baseball, pretty good. So Phillies lost in the World Series, making a big splash, and shout out to all the teams. I believe spending money. There's too many teams there, tanking and not spending and not trying to win. So hey, if you can get it, good for them. And I actually like the move for the Mets. Shorter term deal with Verlander and Grom.
What's the total combined age of Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander now? Those guys have got to be pushing 80 between them.
Probably pushing 80, I think. pushing 80. Pretty wild. But the Mets going for it. And Josh Bell just signed a 2-year deal with the Guardians, first baseman. I think it was like $33 million for Josh Bell. Big names. I think big name.
When are the Jays going to do something?
I don't know. Still waiting on Aaron Judge. Jays rumors they're going to trade a catcher. I'm curious. So the baseball, it's the winter meetings right now. I know they're in San Diego. Hacksaw was talking to me about it last week. And we'll have to see if there's more moves going on. Xander Bogaerts, he's available too, shortstop. So we'll wait and see what happens with the baseball.
Little Jets prospect note, Chaz Lucius and Rutger McGroarty have been named to the USA preliminary roster for the World Juniors. Of course, Chaz playing here in Winnipeg with the Moose. Rutger McGroarty having a great freshman season as a member of the Michigan Wolverines. And a big CFL note today. Star receiver for the BC Lions, Brian Burnham, officially retired today. And, we all remember here in Winnipeg, the tearful Nathan Rourke with his head on the shoulders of Burnham after the game. Rourke tweeted out this afterwards that he thought that was expected, and that was why it was so emotional, knowing that, he'd be probably walking away without a championship. So congratulations to Burnham. What a great CFL career overall. And hey, as far as last night in the NHL, man, going from bad to worse for the Colorado Avalanche. Nathan McKinnon now out, and, listen, just on paper, the Avalanche and the Flyers was a complete mismatch, but we've talked about how many guys they're out right now, and that gets exponentially more problematic for the Super Stanley Cup champions without their captain and number one player up front.
Man, I'm going to pull up their lineup right now. Well, it has McKinnon in it, but yeah, like they're missing McKinnon, Nikushkin, Lehkonen, Byram, Manson, Helm, Landeskog. That's a lot of dudes to be out, and that explains, the loss to the Flyers. I think we'll wait and see about McKinnon. I haven't seen if it's long term or not, but here's the lines. I mean, they're playing Logan O'Connor, like Charles Hudon got into the top 6 there. Who's
the guy in the Ducks jersey at the bottom?
That is Jason Magna. I think he got claimed off waivers today.
I've never seen Daily Faceoff use a guy with another team's jersey in their lineups, but that's where things are at right now for the Colorado Avalanche.
It's right. Hey, another team that's battling injuries too is Edmonton. Zach Hyman was not out for a warm-up. They thought he was going to play, and he did not go, and they activated Kyler Yamamoto, but they're out Kane and Hyman, and their defense is terrible. They got horribly outshot by Washington that's been on a long road trip. Stuart Skinner did his best. I think made 47 saves, but it's rough for Edmonton. We talked here about the Jets slow starts, so they're saying the same thing there in Edmonton, and another loss for them yesterday.
Okay, you know what, man? We've been so tied up in this Maurice talk today. I forgot something. So shout out to everyone that hung around to the end of the program. Guess what, folks? I actually have a pair of tickets to the game tonight.
Oh, man.
I got to give a big shout out to our friend Nevin, who is a longtime Winnipegger, now living down in the Twin Cities, but still supporting the team with season tickets. And Last minute came up. The people that were using it can't go. So we said, Huss, this is a big one tonight. Why don't you give it out to one of your loyal Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners? So Nevin, shout out to you. That's awesome of you to think of us. And Remo, I think we might need to fire up the Wheel of Winners if we can.
Sure. I'm doing it right now. We almost forgot about that.
Yeah, I know. There was so much else going on. So, folks, some nice lower bowl seats for the game tonight in section 120, courtesy of our friend Nevin. So let's open it up, Remo. I guess exclamation mark tickets.
Yeah, when I hit, you'll see it in the chat. But before we do it, hit the thumbs up and hit the subscribe. You gotta hit this thumbs up and subscribe to the channel because it helps the channel
that's
grow.
how you're eligible. That's how you become eligible for this. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and when you see the chat, when you see the prompt, go in there on the Wheel of Winners. So yes, our pal Nevin, excuse me. I met Nevin a few times. He's down in and around the Twin Cities area, and have hooked up with him at a couple games beforehand when the Jets have been on the road. And I'm looking forward to, I've got a beer for you when you get back to town over the course of the holidays, Nevin. Greatly appreciate it. All right, it's open right now. Only enter if you can go to the game tonight, folks. Exclamation mark tickets. Right now, who's in here? Isha Boy Bruce, Mitch, Ryan, Miller Time, Bo, FRWR, Boyko Sucks, Waiters, Justin F. I see you, Lord Loving Life, Ben Lawrence. Shout out to the members. Always appreciate that. Eagle Eyes, Hillary. Hi, Hillary. LB, 80s TV Kid, Kitty Pup 1000, Rolled the Dice. Rolled the Dice have been active in chat today. Doug Phil, Larry TSG, Donnie Boy. All right, Binaural's in there. Free Oleg. Might Oleg go to the game tonight, courtesy of our friend Nevin? Wouldn't that be something? So again, there's lots of people in chat all of a sudden. Yes, you're right. Okay, we'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Now, I will just quickly address a question from the victorious Winnipeg Walter, who probably has a lot of jump in his step after the Bengals did it to my Chiefs again. Huss, what do you think about the possibility that the Bengals get the top seed in the AFC? They've beaten the Chiefs, Titans, Dolphins, Jets, and they play the Bills in Week 18. Well, listen, they're only one game back, so it's very possible. They had that rough start with the 0-2 start. And since then, I mean, they've been as good as anyone. So, I still look back and think of these Bengals games as the fact that the Chiefs have made some mistakes and the Bengals have made them pay. But as I was, listening to something that my buddy Carrington Harrison in Kansas City says, the Chiefs make some of those mistakes weekly, and they're just good enough to get past them until you play a team like the Bills or the Bengals right now. They're going to need to be a lot better and play a full 60 minutes of mistake-free football if they're going to want to beat the Bengals, who have really become their nemesis so far. So, yes, the Bengals are very much in it, and they're going to be a tough out. The AFC playoffs are going to be incredible this year. I mean, you've got the Chiefs, you've got the Bills, you've got the Bengals. Let's not forget about the Dolphins, and a number of the Tennessee Titans are going to be in there. I mean, by the way, they fired their GM today, which was sort of a bizarre thing when you're in first place and set to win that division.
Well, they watched. They watched what AJ Brown did to them on the weekend.
You're out. That was all. That was all. Took. All right. Last call to get in for the Wheel of Winners. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the thumbs up, everybody, and put in exclamation mark tickets. I think we've got pretty much everyone in right now. So Remo, if you want to wrap that up, and we will finish the show. Yeah, if the Bengals beat the Bills, they'll have all the tiebreakers. Oh, listen, it's very, very much possible, and it didn't look that way the way they started. Bit of a hangover from their trip to the Super Bowl last year, but Joe Burrow, it's weird. I mean, obviously I love Mahomes. I think he's the best, but I got a lot of love for Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow is such a stud. I mean, he's single-handedly turned that franchise around, and that is no small task, no small feat, considering how brutal that they'd been for a pretty long time, minus the odd, good season here and there.
Here, so sorry, back to the daily faceoff. So Jason Magna, who was shown on the fourth line of Colorado, he got claimed by Anaheim. So that's why they had him in a Ducks jersey on the Colorado thing. And then, Svechnikov and Toninato on waivers. Assuming Toninato on waivers, if Logan Stanley gets activated. So, we'll have to wait and see what happens. He did practice this morning with the scratches, Capobianco and Harkins as well. And
I wouldn't expect to see Stan in the lineup anytime soon unless somebody gets hurt. I mean, certainly Dylan Sandberg's playing well right now. You got the other top 5 guys all healthy right now, and Sandberg's really been the guy that's basically gone and got that spot for the foreseeable future until he doesn't. All right, let's give away these tickets. Jets Panthers tonight. A nice pair of lower bowls from our pal Nevin. By the way, whoever wins, you're going to need to send us an email at Winnipeg Sports Talk or winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com, and I will send you the tickets afterwards, just before the game. All right, Remo, let's get the wheel. And by the way, yes, no marble race today, but the Marbles Tournament of Champions begins on Thursday. Do not miss it, folks. 12 races. You'll have 12 opportunities to qualify through marbles. And keep an eye on our Instagram and our Facebook at Sports Talk WPG. We will do a post on each, and we'll randomly select 3 names from each to round out the field for the December 30th championship marble race. Consolidated Supply hooking us up with a pair of Bomber season tickets for the winner. Can't thank those guys enough. And what a great way to finish up the year with what seemingly is the most popular thing, and that's the marble race on Fridays. We're doing it 12 days in a row and a championship race on the 30th of December. All right, back to the operation at hand, giving away these tickets right now. Remo, you got everyone in? Oh, is there a Rudy Johnson blast in the chat?
Well, we're talking about old Bengals, so someone name dropped. I loved it when Rudy Johnson had his full name on his jersey on the back. There's only a couple players who have done that, so.
He was good. Bengals running backs, man, over the years. Obviously, Icky Woods. Corey Dillon had a couple monster fantasy seasons there for a little while. Daily winners do not win a hoodie, Stormy. We don't have enough hoodies to give away for all of those.
Yeah, we can discuss if we want to give them a T-shirt, but
yeah. Well, as I say, this is really part of our special season-ending Tournament of Champions. It's about qualifying 1, 2, or 3 to get in. So yeah, 36 marbles from the 12 races, 3 from Facebook, 3 from Instagram, 42 marbles in the September 30th championship race for the Bomber season tickets, courtesy of Consolidated Supply. All right, we got to get this pod up, so let's fire up this wheel and see who's going to the game tonight, courtesy of WST and our loyal listener in Minnesota, former Winnipegger, Nevin. All right, lots of people looking to go to the game, Reem. Everyone is in. Thanks for entering, everyone, and thanks for kicking around till the end of the program. Let's spin it and see who's going to see the Jets take on the Panthers. The wheel is spinning. Oh, Rob Pepper. Rob Pepper was just claiming in chat that the Dallas Cowboys were going to win the Super Bowl. Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that you, Rob, are going to the game tonight. So send us an email, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com, and we'll get those tickets and send them to you before the game, probably about an hour or so beforehand, as long as I get them soon. Great stuff today. Thanks so much. We had a heck of a lot of fun today. A little bit of trip down memory lane and a lot of talk about what we're going to see tonight when Paul Maurice and the Panthers come to town. Had this one circled in the calendar for a while. I'm sure you have too. Hopefully we'll see you at the game tonight. Rob's going to be there. I'm going to be there. And one place I know we'll be is right back here tomorrow on Winnipeg Sports Talk at 1 o'clock. Murata Tesh will join us. Lots of reaction to tonight's game and a look ahead to a quick road trip for the Winnipeg Jets as well. Thanks again to all the sponsors. Thanks to Bill Lindsay, Brandon Rewucki. Great chat with Mike McIntyre as well. Great stuff from Michael Remis to get all those clips for you from both the Winnipeg Jets and from Paul Maurice. And most of all, thanks to all of you for making us a part of your day. Enjoy the game tonight. Let's get this 2 points. I want to have a fun conversation about a big win tomorrow on the program. We'll see what happens just after 7 p.m. from Canada Life Center. For Michael Remis, I'm Andrew Paterson. This has been Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Thanks for being with us, and we'll catch you tomorrow.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.